This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, Director Gray.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Director Deere, we have 4 board members online. We have a quorum.
Are we expecting Director Houston, or do we know?
I don't know. I'm going to give him a text. He didn't attend our meetings yesterday, so.
Yeah. Well, we have a full committee here, and we have that's a quorum. And we have we're past the 11:30 hour, so I'll call the meeting to order and determine that we have a complete quorum. Is there any public comment?
No, Chairman Deere, there's no public comment.
Okay. Are there any presentation?
There are none.
All right. Under action calendar, approval of minutes.
Yeah, we have a few items on the action calendar today, 5 different items, and the first one, I'll take that one. So we have pretty straightforward. We have the minutes for asking for the approval of the minutes from the December 9th, 2020 special board meeting, the December 16th, 2020 Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special board meeting, and the December 21st, 2020 special board meeting minutes. So those 3 items are what's up for approval by this committee to forward to the board.
All right. Are there any additions or questions? Are there any additions or questions to the minutes?
No, not that I'm aware of.
All right. Member Desi, do you agree that we should pass it on to the
I would recommend that we move this forward to the full board meeting.
Okay, fine. We'll go on to item 5B.
Okay, item 5B, by the way, good morning to everybody, Chairman Deere, members of the committee, and the public. And we have Leticia Vasquez here from Central Basin on the call, and staff. So 5B is an item that is pertains to what's in our admin code, and annually, as per the admin code, section 2-1.202, it states in there that the board shall reorganize in January of each year at its first regular board meeting, which is January 25th coming up, by electing one of its members as president. At the same time, the board may also select a vice president who shall be a board member, a treasurer, and secretary who may be members of the board, and a deputy treasurer and deputy secretary who will be the district staff members. The board page, this is on board packet page 22. This is what we do every year. It's standard per admin code. And the only action here is really about, it's in the recommendation that the board elects the following 4 board officers and 2 appointed officers at the January 25th, 2021 board meeting.
All right, and that will be the recommendation. Do you agree, Desi, that we forward the recommendation?
I agree.
All right, so if there's no other discussion, I'll make a comment. We've been rotating these offices every year, and that way every board member gets to be president of the board once every 5 years. I think we should continue to do that, and I hope the board will do that at their regular meeting. That's all I have. Anything else on this kind of subject?
I would just add that that's a good policy, and I would support that policy wholeheartedly.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. And we'll go on. That'll be that recommendation will be forwarded to the board. We'll go to item 5C.
Okay, 5C on the action calendar. We retain a bank to handle our general banking services, and every so often we go out to bid to test the market for those board services. So we do have a recommendation based on our recent RFP process, and Mary Ann Rexroad, our excellent manager of finance, will be presenting on this item. Mary Ann?
Good morning, Patrick. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, directors. As Patrick mentioned, good morning. As Patrick mentioned, we do utilize the service of a bank to provide our way of paying our employees, our directors, receiving deposits and so forth. Currently, we have 3 different accounts with our bank that we're using as US Bank. And those services, those 3 accounts are for general checking, which includes, as I mentioned, payroll, receiving deposits and things like that. We also have an integrated regional water management program account, IRWIM for short, and we also have a health reimbursement account. Per best practices and following those best practices, staff did post requests for proposal for these services and does recommend that the board authorize a general manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Bank of the West based on their stated fee schedule. Let me give you a little bit more background. So as I mentioned, West Basin does use many services of the bank. That includes for direct deposits, internal and external transfers such as wires and ACHs. We do remote deposit. We also use the bank to transfer funds in and out of our LAIF account, the Local Agency Investment Fund. We utilize the bank's secured internet platform, in which we have a password protected website. And those are all very important things that we wanted to look at when we were looking for a new bank. We did post the RFP on West Basin's e-procurement system. We were fortunate we received 4 different proposals. Each one was reviewed by staff. When we reviewed the proposals, we evaluated them based on their compliance with the RFP requirements, as well as the quality and completeness of their proposal. We looked at the bank profile and the qualifications of the staff that would be working on our account. We also looked at the capabilities of the bank and, of course, their proposed fees. All 4 banks were then interviewed, virtual interview, I should say, and we had finance staff present at that interview that would be using those services the most. We did find that based on the scores, which you will see on the following page, on page 25, based on the written proposal, the platform, the interview, we found that Bank of the West received the highest score and therefore is being recommended by staff. I would like just to mention that West Basin, or Bank of the West, does have a very dedicated government service team, and they maintain very good physical and digital security environment, and they are financially sound. With that, I'd like to read the recommendation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just trying to get down to the recommendation here. So the recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Bank of the West for general banking services based on their stated fee schedule. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from board members?
I don't have any.
No, thank you.
Okay. I assume that Desi agreed to pass this on to the board then, right? The recommendation.
I do.
Okay, we'll do that. Well, thank you very much. We'll go to
Thank
item
you.
5. Thank you. 5D.
5D, yes. This item, and by the way, we have 2 of our consultants on the line here. I think you're Darren Hodge from PFM and Louise Houghton. So this, we have some bond refunding coming up, opportunities coming up in this year 2021, potentially of large amounts in the $50 to $100 million transaction range. And so finance staff with our financial advisors, PFM, went out to the market and interviewed, did a request for qualifications process. And Margaret is here to describe who the successful folks who can, banks really, who can, financial institutions that can be part of the underwriting pool help us with these major financial transactions going forward. Margaret?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Patrick, and good morning to board members and staff that are here today on the F&A committee. As Patrick has shared, we wanted to bring forward to the board a selection of an underwriting pool, something that we have used in the past. We don't currently have an underwriting pool. And let me just step back for a moment. Back in December, at the Finance and Administration Committee that we held in December, we shared with you our outlook for the 2021 and a potential financing transaction. In that discussion, we talked about our opportunities for refunding of our current debt, as well as some opportunities to find some additional construction proceeds that might be necessary to fund our capital program. So as shared with you on page 27 of the board packet, we wanted just to share with you that the process that we went through and why it's necessary to have an underwriting pool. So first of all, the district does have about $212 million of outstanding long-term debt. And again, of that $212 million, our 2011 bonds are eligible for refunding. And that is, as Patrick said, into that $50 to $75 million range, if you will, of bonds that are refunded so that we can earn a lower rate, or I should say, acquire a lower rate to be able to pay for those bonds. In addition to that, we do have $20 million of our commercial paper program that is outstanding that we may consider as well for a refunding opportunity. But in addition to that, we also wanted just to share with you our 5-year capital plan. And this is the 5-year capital plan that shows within our fiscal year 2021 budget. And that chart that you see there on page 27 shows you sort of what that outlook looks like. So for fiscal year 21, we have about $43 million of projects that have been identified. Some of those are being funded through the commercial paper program, and there could be some additional funding that we may need. So with all of that as a backdrop, we understand that we have a significant need of capital projects going forward, not just for 2021, but in that 5-year window, and felt that it was an appropriate time to establish that underwriting pool again. So if we go to page 28, it talks a little bit more about the specific transaction for the 2021 and what the potential opportunities are for us. And again, it's to refund those existing bonds that we have with 2011 A's and B's that are eligible for refunding. We may fix out a portion of our commercial paper. We may finance new money and look at our swaps. None of those items have been fully decided at this time, and that is what part of the work that would be done by the financing team, along with those banks that would be selected to work on this transaction. And into the specific work, not only for this transaction, but any future transactions, if you go to the middle of page 28, you can kind of see the scope of work that those underwriting banks do. Again, they would help us find and market those individuals, those investors that would want to be interested in purchasing our bonds, and would help us in the review of those documentation, as well as underwrite those bonds should we go out to market and there are no investors in that particular segment, that they would then underwrite those bonds. So with that as a backdrop, again, we, as Patrick mentioned, did go out for a request for qualifications. It was sent to 18 qualified investment banking firms, and on December 18th, we received 13 of those proposals. We did review those proposals, and the details of that is shown on page 30 of your packet, and I will just refer your attention to that page there. We did look for them as far as their experience. What is their experience not only in California, but working on water, and the experience of the team that would be assigned to the particular area that's there. We also then looked to their specific structuring and how they would market the proposed transaction we talked about, the 2021. What were their ideas about what they could do? And there was a variety of ideas that were shared, and we would look at that as far as ideas on their creativity, but also maintaining to get us the best rates, if you will, and to see how we can structure it with our existing debt portfolio. We also looked at their credit analysis. Again, when we go out to market these bonds, one of the things we do before we do that is go to the rating agencies. Right now we're rated by Moody's and S&P. And we would go to those rating agencies and to get their analysis of our proposed transaction. And that information is shared when we go out and market those bonds. And then finally, they refer to their fee as called a takedown fee. So that is the fee associated for every bond that is sold. And so we looked at the pricing that's there. What's nice today is that the rates are fairly low, and so we're in a good position, not only from a takedown fee, but also just interest rates. Again, we shared with you last month about that this is a good time to be out into the market. So based off of those reviews of those, like I said, those criteria for the 13 firms, we then scored them, and you can see that we have a list here from highest score to lowest scored, and we picked a dividing line of any score above 80 would then be recommended to our underwriting pool. The reason why we would have multiple firms is that we want to make sure that when we have a transaction, we would then have the breadth and depth of those firms that are out there. Usually we have a senior book manager, that's the person that leads the transaction, but that's also depending upon the size of the transaction. Usually if it's in the range of 75 plus $1 million, that we would have multiple firms, and we would want to use them as co-managers. They would then help to additionally market it out to their investment firms that they would be interested. With that said, again, we wanted to make sure we also had a diverse portfolio here. So we have some regional firms, we have some of the bigger known banking firms that are out there. Gives us a great diverse portfolio. And with that, we have 7 firms that we are recommending for the underwriting pool. And with that, I would like to read the recommendation and then see if you have any questions. So the recommendation is that the board approves the underwriting pool for the next 5-year period for the qualified investment banking firms of Barclays, Citi, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Siebert Williams Shank, Stifel, and Wells Fargo. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
Director Deere, I don't have any questions, and I would move that this be moved forward to the board.
All right, I agree with you. Any other questions from other board members? If not, then we'll forward this recommendation to the board. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So that brings us to our final item on the action calendar today. And this is requesting the adoption of or approval of a resolution. But basically, from time to time, we review the number of policies in the admin code, and in conjunction with our bond counsel and general counsel, and they are updated and modified as needed. And those changes are incorporated into the policy through this vehicle here, the resolution. So Mary Ann will, again, our still excellent manager of finance, will walk us through this. Mary Ann?
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning again, directors. I'm going to start my report on page 31. It does go on for a bit because we do have the policies attached, but I'll walk you through those as well. So as Patrick mentioned, West Basin does maintain a number of financial policies within its administrative code, following best practices and as required by policies. The staff periodically reviews those policies and updates them to reflect changes in law, either federal and or state, and also to provide some financial flexibility for the district. Working with our bond counsel, our financial advisors, as well as our investment manager, we did note those recommended changes within the policies, which are redlined, and we'll, as I said, walk through those, and we'll go through each one. Below you'll see we do have a number of them, so we'll just hit each one of them as we go along. But staff did ask our district council to prepare a resolution which is number 01-21-1121, which incorporates the changes and additions, and that we do recommend that the board approve this resolution. And if I could ask you to move down to our first item, which is the investment policy, that can be found on the first changes on page 57. So on page 57 of the investment policy, we did remove some language, and this was to address changes in the local government code. And so you see those being striked out on this page. Moving down to page 61, under 4-1-209N in particular, we did add some language here. Again, this was recommended by our investment manager. And what this does, it allows West Basin to invest in a local government investment pool. And what this does, it increases our options when we're looking for overnight liquidity vehicles. The third change to the policy is found on page 61 at the bottom. And here you'll see that we added some language, and this would permit the district to invest in securities that are issued or backed by the United States government that could result in a negative or zero interest accrual. Now, we're hoping we never have to do that, but with the low interest rate environment, as Margaret mentioned, that is a possibility, so it just gives us that option. And those were all the changes under the investment policy. I can either pause here and see if there's any questions on the investment policy, or I can move on.
Why don't you move on?
Okay, all right, so let's move down to the next policy, which is the Small and Community Bank Investment Program policy. We had a number of changes here. And if you recall back in November, staff had shared several different approaches of how to engage some of the small and community banks to participate into our program. Margaret made an excellent presentation and provided these recommendations. We've tried to incorporate those recommendations into this policy. So starting off on page, and I think we're already there, on page 70, the first change that we're recommending is to add language where we would outline a process to expand the investment of the small and community banks, making it a little bit less cumbersome for some of those banks. And in particular, under section 2, you'll see language, I'm sorry, section 3A. It's just right below there. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. We also added language that we required the banks having up to $150,000 investment to submit just an annual like 1 to 2 page summary of their involvement in the community. Therefore, no longer requiring them to make an annual presentation that we used to do before. Also,
Let me interrupt you. May I? This is Don Deere. I'm reading that line A. It shall provide a 1-2 written summary. It doesn't say page written summary. There's a missing word there.
Yeah, you are correct. We'll have to make that change there. It should say 1 to 2 page written summary. Thank you, Director Dare. And then below that, you'll see for investments that are greater than $250,000, we are requiring them to, on their initial investment, to make a presentation to the board. But we also made it a little bit less cumbersome. We don't have them having to meet all the criteria that we had previously in section 1. And then moving down to page 71, under section 3D, if you recall, we had brought back a number of times when some of the banks that we were working with were not able to meet the interest rate requirement. So we did make it a little bit easier for them to meet that requirement. We used to have that interest rate tied to LAIF. Here we have the language, we said that the rate would be no lower than the overnight federal funds rate plus 10 basis points. And hopefully that would make it just a little bit less cumbersome for some of the banks to participate in this program. Also right below, you'll see in item E, we did ask that banks that are new to the program that are seeking investments greater than 250, they would start off with a presentation as we currently do, but then after that initial presentation, then they would be required to again make that, and I'm sorry, 1 to 2 page summary to the board. And then at the top of page 72.
Excuse me, this is Desi. Before we move on, if you go to item E on page 71, did you mean to maybe leave in the community involvement? You struck out, and that seems like an awkward ending to that sentence.
You're right. The word involvement should stay there. Yes, that was struck. Okay, I will make that change as well. Thank you.
$300.
And then moving down to, I think we left off on item 4-1.301, which is at the top of page 72. All right, this is where we added the new requirement for banks with investments greater than the 250,000, but up to $1 million, where they would submit an annual summary of their bank's community involvement. That would be after the initial year that they started with the program. And those are all the changes that we incorporated, again, based on this discussion that happened back in November. We wanted to try to, again, make this program a little easier for some of the small banks to participate, but yet keep some of the features that we had previously with the banks coming to us, letting us know where their community involvement is, and then how they would continue to keep us up to date on those transactions. And so that's all I have on the small and community bank investment program. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, or we can move on to the next policy, which would be then our swap policy. All right, hearing none. Well, good news on the swap policy. We did go through that. We had, again, legal counsel review as well as our financial advisors. We didn't find any changes to that policy, but we did include it here for your referral. If you would like to see what that policy is, it is attached for you. But again, no changes were made to that or being recommended to that policy. So the next policy that did have recommended changes was our debt management policy, and that starts on page 85. We had very few changes to this. They were more clerical than anything else. If you recall, the title of the Chief Financial Officer was changed to the Executive Manager of Finance. So we made that change throughout the policy. And I won't go through every page that it's on, but you'll see that you'll see the red line through those titles. And then the last item, again, was just for clarifying language. And that was on page, at the very end, 4-1.615, again, just adding some language to clarify on the definition of the reserve fund. And those are all the changes that we had on the debt management policy. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer on that policy. All right, the last policy that we have attached for you is the disclosure procedure policy. And that starts on page 104 of your packet. So West Basin reviewed this policy with its bond counsel, Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Roth, and they provided a number of suggestions to this policy. And again, it looks like there's a lot of colors in here, but some of it's just we moved some language from other parts of the policy. So I'll just walk you through this. At the very top here at 4-1.902, you'll see that we had moved some language, and we also add a little bit of language. The district typically has issued debt through its financing corp, but we wanted to make it clear here that the district can also issue debt directly under the district's name, or it can issue debt as well through a joint powers agency. So we added that language here just again to clarify what the entities are that are allowed to issue debt. We also did make a few changes when it came to like the Securities Exchange Commission. We wanted to make sure we abbreviated that here as the SEC. And there were some other just clarifying language on this first part. Moving down to page 107 on section 4-1.904. And here again, we just made some additional changes to clarify the district under certain circumstances, the issuer. So it can be the district, it could be, as I mentioned, the Joint Financing Authority, or it could be the or a JPA. So all those things are then included in the word issuer here. And then moving down to at the bottom of page 109, there was substantial language here that we wanted to add, starting here at the top of 904. Part of the disclosure is that district staff needs to be involved in this process. And so we wanted to make it clear here that we would give this policy to each one of the department managers or anyone else that's involved in this disclosure requirement. So we added that to the very top of 904. And then following down to, let's see, the next section, which I believe is on page 109. We had added language to include an amendment to the Securities and Exchange Commission Rule 15C2-12. And you'll see there's a lot of language here. Basically, this is language that's required and it is verbatim from the rule itself. And so we did talk to our district, our bond counsel, and they said you needed to include everything verbatim here. So again, you'll see a lot of blue in this section, but this is directly from the amendment of Rule 15-2C-12. And that ends all the adjustments or additions and changes to the disclosure policy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. Okay. Then I think I'll go through the recommendation for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, that the Board of Directors of West Basin Municipal Water District approves, adopts, and authorizes the President to sign resolution number 01-21-1121, a resolution of the Board of Directors of West Basin Municipal Water District, amending resolution number 01-16-1024 Administrative Code in sections dealing with small and community bank program, debt management policy, investment policy, and disclosure procedures.
All right, questions or comments from board members?
None?
Ezzy, go ahead.
I would move that resolution number 01-16-1024 be forwarded to the board.
All right, I agree, and we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
President Deere, we will make the changes noted here in the version that moves forward to the board as brought up by yourself and Director Alvarez on page 70 and 71 respectively.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that concludes our action item, 5 action items for today. Now we move to the information calendar. And the first item is our standing monthly financial report, which is required by our administrative code, section 4-1104B, internal reporting. And we actually have 6 different segments to this usually, which Mary Ann, you can go anywhere, right? Yep, you're back up, Mary Ann, to cover the monthly financial report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Yes, so if we could begin on page 116 of the packet. This is the demand list for the month of December 2020. And if you recall, the demand list includes all the payments that are made by West Basin to conduct business. If you scroll down to page 125, this would be the end of the demand list. You'll see that the total payments for the month of December was 17.7 million. Just want to point out that's about 1.5 million greater than what we paid in November, which was about 16.2 million. With that, I don't have anything in particular to point out on the demand list, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Yeah, any questions?
None?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, it's Director Houston.
Howdy.
Hey everybody, I just had one question off the top of my head, Marianne. I was looking through this and I saw the phone bill for the Donald L. Deere building is pretty high this past month. So I'm just curious why it's so high. Looks like it was over $2,000. I didn't think that we had many folks working at the office, and I don't see it being that high in past months. So does anybody have an answer for that?
I can just mention, I can look into it for you. I do know we are still using the phone. I have it come onto my computer, so if anybody calls the office, they don't get just a message. It actually calls me here at my residence, and so we are still using the services of the phone, but I can definitely look into why it was higher.
Yeah, could you guys check in that and email it to me? Because again, I mean, I see they do seem to fluctuate, but the Donald L. Deere building went up considerably high for December. So I'd just like to know what might have happened.
All right.
Well, we'll check into that, Scott, Director Houston, what might have happened, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you. And I'm going to look through the list while someone else wants to ask a question. Okay, thanks.
All right. So shall we move to the cash and investment report? That can be found on page 126. Just a couple of things I want to point out here. This report includes all of our operating cash and investments, and this is as of December 31st, 2020. I almost said 21. This, you'll see at the very top left-hand corner, our total market value as of that period of time was 87.1 million. I'm happy to report that's about 5.3 million than it was, or 5.7 million higher than it was back on November 30th. One of the reasons for the increase in our cash and investments, we did receive standby charges during the month of December, which amounted about $4 million. This first page, if you recall, it provides an overview of our investments. And in the middle there, you see a pie that shows the types of securities that we have, and it gives you by percentage. Below that pie, you'll see is a listing of, again, of the security types that the district owns, and it shows the market value by dollar. On the following page, we'll show, there you go, thank you, is a bar chart. And on the bar chart, we do show the, at the very top, the credit quality of the investments that West Basin carries. And just as a reminder, on the far left side, you'll see the column that says NA. That is made up of the LAIF account that we have, our general checking account. We do have some custodial accounts that we have, as well as a few money market funds, and that's all included in that column. Those do not receive credit ratings, so that's why you do not see a credit with that, a rating with that. At the bottom of that page, you'll see this is our maturity distribution, again, for our investment portfolio at 12/31/2020. And as you recall, our government code does not let us invest in maturities past 5 years. So you'll see it's from basically on demand up into 5 years. And then moving to the following page, this page gives you the all the transactions for the month of December. One thing I wanted to point out here, you'll see almost to the middle of the page under maturities, we did have a certificate of deposit with East West Bank that did mature during the month. Those funds were received and have been put back into our checking account. And the next pages will be a list of all the investments that the district has in detail. So I won't bore you with all those details, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on the cash and investment report. All right, well, let's move on then to our monthly sales report. And that should start at on page 132. All right, so on the monthly sales report, this covers the fiscal year through December 2020. And I just want to point out the very top of the page, you see the imported retail sales. We do have a budget of 103,000 for the entire year. We do also show last year, so the prior year's sales, that was in the blue column there, or the blue bar, and the current year's sales are shown in the red bar, and the black line is tracking the budget. So a couple of things I wanted to point out on this particular page. You'll notice for the month of December that we had sales of a little over 8,000 acre feet of imported retail. You'll see that's about 870 acre feet above last December and about 280 acre feet above the budget. One of the reasons that we are above last year in the budget, we did have a warmer December of 2020 than of 19. I went back and I looked, and actually we had more rainfall last year. We had about 4.5 inches of rainfall in the LA area in December of 2019. Where this past month, we had about 1.8 inches of rainfall. So a considerable difference, which makes sense why we had more imported retail sales. And then on a year-to-date basis, we're tracking fairly well again. We are slightly below last year by about 540 acre feet or 1%, but we are tracking above budget. Budget is 53,896, and our sales through December is 56,010, so about 2,000 acre feet over what we budgeted, or about 4%. So we're tracking well for the year. And then moving down to the second half of the page, these are the sales that are related to both the Dominguez Gap and the West Coast Barrier. This is the barrier water that's injected there. And you'll see for the month of December, we had 537 acre feet. And just to give you a little breakdown, we had at the Dominguez Gap, we injected 366 acre feet. And for the West Coast Barrier, we injected 171 acre feet. On a year-to-date basis, we are tracking slightly under budget. Budget is 2,352 acre feet. And you can see this is a little harder to budget on a month-to-month basis. So we take the total budget and we just divide it by 12. So for 6 months, you get 2,352 acre feet, and we're tracking at 2,167. So we're about 185 acre feet short of budget on that. And if you could move down to then on page 133, we can go over the recycled water sales and then the brewer desalter. So at the very top of this page, you'll see the recycled water sales, again, for the month of December and for the fiscal year. The tan bar shows you the sales each month for last year. And then the blue bar, or I guess it's more like purple, is the 2021 of the current fiscal year. And the black bar again shows where we should be tracking based on budget. So I want to make a couple of highlights for the month of December. You'll see we were very close to last year, about 89 acre feet from what we had sold last December. And then we are slightly lower than the budget for the month of December at 2,775. We did have 2,633 acre feet of sales. There's a couple of reasons for that. We did have lower sales to the barrier during the month. And talking to operations, I understand there were basically two reasons for that. The County of LA, which maintains the barriers, they were doing some maintenance work on the first part of the month. And then we also participated in the load curtailment program with NRG, which also then created some lower sales for us to the barrier. On the positive side, I always like to give the positive too. We did have higher disinfected tertiary sales for the month of December as compared to last year. In fact, we had a number of new customers that we've added on during the past year, and that attributed to why we had some higher acre feet on the disinfected tertiary side. On a year-to-date basis, again, we are tracking at currently we have 18,229. This is about 680 acre feet less than what we're budgeting at 18,912. However, we're only about 200 acre feet short of what we were last year at this time. And then moving down to the brewer desalter, you'll see there we didn't have any sales to report in December. It's my understanding that there was still some work that was being done on membrane cleanings and other minor repairs. And so we're hoping to have that up and running next month. And I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions on the monthly water sales. All right, well, moving on, the next report is your director's conference and travel expense. You'll see we're tracking well below budget. The budget is $75,000 for the year, and so far through December, we're at $3,834. On the following page is the executive management and staff travel expense, again, tracking well below budget. Total through the end of December was just under $9,000 compared to a budget of $150,000. And that concludes my report. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
On the director's conference and travel expenses under Division 3, you're showing registration for $499. I don't recall I registered for anything, but if that's from the previous director, for clarification.
I will double check, but yes, this is for the entire fiscal year, Director Alvarez. So, but I will get back to you to let you know what specifically that's for.
Yeah, it's for your predecessor.
Thank you, Patrick.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Houston.
Go ahead.
Sure, real quick. I just wanted to add on, Marianne. I was looking through, so I see actually last month there were 2 different checks for AT&T on telephone expenses, and for the Donald L. Deere building, it was more than $3,000. So when you look into that and follow up with me, could you just account for those 2 checks, because they just seem awfully high at the office building, when my understanding is not many people are in the office building. So I would just be curious as to why there was a spike in the phone bill versus months in the past. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that and get back to you, Director Houston, and I'll also share that with the board.
Any other questions for me?
Yes, thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Can you quickly give me the agenda?
We'll receive and file a report.
Okay, thanks again, Marion. So the next item is item 5B. And this is an oral report from our fabulous manager of human resources, Michelle Green. And it's on a kind of an important matter that I wanted the board to get a sort of a briefing on, but it pertains to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, known as FFCRA, which provides for some leave in the event that folks are taken down with the coronavirus. But that ended at December 31st, I think, 2020. But, Michelle, if you could just give some highlights and some of your thoughts on where we're at with that. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, Chairman Deere and board members. This item was actually brought to the board on April 27th, 2020 as an information item to the board. And the title of that item was Paid Sick Leave and Expanded Family and Medical Leave under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. On March 18th, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and in an effort to reduce the impact of the virus on American families, the Senate passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, referenced typically as FFCRA, and essentially President Trump signed the bill into law later that day. The act amended the Family and Medical Family Leave Act by providing FMLA emergency leave and provided emergency paid sick leave to employees for certain COVID-19 related reasons. The FFCRA paid leave provisions became effective April 1, 2020,
and applied to leave taken between April 1, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Essentially, the Act provided for 2 weeks up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at the employee's regular rate of pay, where the employee is unable to work or wasn't able to work because the employee is quarantined, and that's usually pursuant to federal, state, or local government or under advisement of a healthcare provider, or if the employee has tested positive themselves for COVID-19 and or are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis. The Act also provided 2 weeks up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at 2/3 the employee's regular rate of pay because the employee is unable to work because of a bona fide need to care for an immediate family member diagnosed with COVID-19 or who is subject to quarantine, or care for a child under 18 years of age whose school or childcare provider is closed or unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. So essentially, there are 6 qualifying reasons under which an employee can utilize FFCRA. Those 6 reasons are: 1, if the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19, if they have been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID-19, if the employee has tested positive themselves for COVID-19 and or is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis. The 4th reason is caring for an individual subject to an order described in the reason number 1, or self-quarantine as described in reason 2, or is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed for reasons related to COVID-19, or experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services in consultation with the Secretaries of Labor and Treasury. The leave itself, the amount of leave that can be taken is, as I indicated, full-time employees working 40 hours per week may take up to 80 hours of emergency paid sick leave, and part-time employees may take up to the number of hours that they work on an average over a 2-week period. So there are caps that this Act placed on the amount that would be paid for emergency paid sick leave. So for reasons number 1 through 3 that I mentioned earlier, the cap is $511 a day and $5,110 in total over the entire paid sick leave period. For reasons 4 through 6 that I mentioned earlier, the cap is $200 per day and $2,000 in total over the entire paid sick leave period. And essentially, the Act indicated that once a full emergency paid sick leave is used or taken by an employee, they are no longer eligible for additional leave under the Act. However, they could utilize any other sick, or vacation accrued leaves that they may have on the book. Now, FFCRA leave expired, as Patrick mentioned earlier, on December 31st, 2020, and was not extended by the federal government. However, many public agencies have decided to extend paid emergency leave under FFCRA. Some of those agencies have decided to extend the leave through March 31st, some through June 30th of 2021. Some of those agencies include Metropolitan Water District and City of Hermosa Beach. Metropolitan has extended, for example, this leave through June 30th of 2021. Staff plans to bring this item back to the board next month to make a recommendation to extend the leave for district employees. So far, since the pandemic, a few employees of the district have been required to use FFCRA leave. And as you are aware, that there has been a surge in cases in over the country and particularly in LA County. And as of yesterday, actually, an announcement was made that President-elect Biden plans to propose extending FFCR paid leave through September of 2021. Lastly, the fiscal impact of providing said leave, it's really difficult to determine the exact fiscal impact because it all depends really on how many employees are affected by any of the leave reasons that I've mentioned earlier. However, the leave, because it places a cap on the amount of money that an employee can receive under the leave, the impact is likely minimal. So again, that's a background information on what the leave provides. Staff does plan to bring this item back to the board as soon as possible next month to make a recommendation that the board approve extending the leave. At this point, again, President-elect Biden has made an announcement that he intends to extend this leave through September. However, as you know, there are certain channels that will need to be taken before that is approved. So before that time, we are requesting or will be making a request to the board to extend the leave for district staff. That concludes my oral report, unless any of the board members have any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes,
No.
Director. Oh, Desi, go first. He's your committee chair.
No, I said none, Director Gray.
Oh, okay. Michelle, thank you for that report, which is a very important one. Can you kind of project out what the potential fiscal impact will be based on the number of employees we have, kind of the worst case scenario, what that would be? Because I think we have like 50, oh, excuse me. We have about a little over 50 employees, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So, and maybe we can look at the worst case scenario. Obviously, hopefully that's not the case, but at least this will give us some idea. And I think I heard you say that have there been other employees, our employees that have already taken the benefit of this leave? Did you say that?
Yes. So
Okay.
to answer your question, Director Gray, I will maybe work with finance to determine what an estimate could be potentially of staff that could be affected by it. That's really hard to determine since essentially we don't know if anyone will be, because let me make one statement in that there are a number of employees who may get COVID, but because their symptoms are mild, and again, we're all working remotely for the most part, if their symptoms are mild and they have no need to really rest or anything like that, and they can perform their normal functions, they won't have a need to take this leave. So there are a number of individuals who may get COVID, but never have to utilize the leave. The only time at which an employee would use the leave is if they are severely sick or sick enough that they can't actually perform their duties.
Right.
So that's one thing. And so far, I think we've had, since the pandemic, I think we've had about 3 employees who have had to utilize the leave.
Mhm. Yeah, and I understand you can't, accurately project out because you just don't know. But, obviously there's talk about there may be another surge, and which means that more people may become infected. It doesn't mean that more people will get sick enough to take the leave. But in terms of just fiscally looking at our budget, what that could mean if it's the worst case scenario, I guess that's what I'm saying to you, because really don't know how long it may last. There's talk of a third vaccine coming online or becoming available to folks and other things. So, but back to the fiscal part, just kind of the worst case scenario, especially if we continue to be in the pandemic mode for the summer or whatever amount of time that we're going to have to be in this position. My question was going to be about whether or not the Biden administration had really made comments about this, and you already answered that maybe where you will extend it to September, which is interesting because that kind of says a lot, but you don't know until it actually happens with the new administration coming in. But you will be making a recommendation to extend it to whatever months that you fill as an HR manager to do that. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for bringing this to the board because it is very important that we do take care of our employees. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Apparently not. Very good report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was excellent. Okay, President Dio, that brings us to item 7, closed session. We have no closed session today. And then item 8 is director's comments and future agenda items.
Are there any directors who wish to make comments? I'll start with Desi. Any comments?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, and let's see, who was next in line? Harold? Harold was on board.
Thank you. No comments. Thank you. Very good meeting.
Okay, President Gloria?
Yeah, yes, I just want to again thank staff, all of the staff for great reports this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott?
No comments. Great job, staff. Thank you.
If there's no further business, then we are adjourned. Our next regular meeting is February 12th. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just one thing, President Deere. The Monday is a district holiday, so the offices will be closed, but we do have a water policy and just a reminder, water policy and legislation committee at 1 o'clock on Tuesday. And with Monday being a holiday, those are the only two things I wanted to share with the group.
Thank you for doing that. If there's no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.